30, 80, 55, 55, especially if you're fond of a night at the dogs, a bit of greyhound racing. Tell us what you think of what's happening in parts of Australia right now. Greyhound racing is to be banned in the Australian state of New South Wales from next year. It's been suspended already, in fact, because of widespread cruelty. The state government took the step after a commission of inquiry found evidence of mass killing of uncompetitive dogs and the use of live bait, including piglets and possums, during training sessions. The sport employs thousands of people across Australia, but lawmakers in New South Wales believe the evidence of cruelty outweighs all of that economic benefit. Greyhound racing is, of course, very popular across Northern Ireland, indeed across Britain and Ireland as a whole. Let's talk to Nora McElstrom, a greyhound racing trainer, trustee of Wimbledon Greyhound Welfare as well in Hersham. How are you doing, Nora?
Very well, thank you.
Tell us why you are drawn to this sport.
Well, the main problem, thing is the dogs. They're so addictive and they're very nice. They're easy to handle. They're very nice temperament. And they love racing.
Beautiful dogs.
They're very beautiful dogs. And we've got to say, next door to my kennel is the retirement kennel. And we get loads of visitors between 11 and 2, come down every single day, Christmas Day as well. They can go anywhere they like in the kennel, so nothing's hidden from them.
Nora, I've just said it's very popular here in Northern Ireland, across the UK, actually. Can you give us any figures, any sense of just how popular this sport is?
Well, it's not as popular as it used to be. I mean, once upon a time there was millions of people went, but and there's a lot of tracks have closed, but there's still, quite a few 100,000 people, I would say, go every year to watch them.
And a lot of money being made as well, of course, on the gambling part of it.
Well, mostly, I think, yes, by the bookmaking firms, but they are now putting more money into the welfare of the greyhounds at long last.
Are you drawn to that part of it, or to seeing the dogs run? What is the attraction for you personally?
The attraction mainly for me is I do like to see them run, but it is just going into work every day and looking after them. It's more of a hobby for me because it's a pleasure.
Aileen Ward's also with us from the campaign group Great Exploitations. How are you doing, Aileen?
I'm fine, thank you.
Would you like to see us go the way of this state in Australia and ban this sport outright?
I would indeed, and my reasons for that it's based on the fact that there is an industrial scale use of these dogs. The culling of healthy pups that fail to chase a mechanical lure or too slow to make the grade, the destruction of dogs that sustain treatable but career-ending injuries on dangerous tracks which are designed very much for the spectators' entertainment, and the destruction of greyhounds which are no longer suitable as a betting product. They're too old, they're too slow, not enough homes can be found for them, and that's the reason why.
Does that sound in any way familiar to you, Nora, that the destruction of healthy pups and widespread cruelty?
Well, when they say puppies, I'm presuming she means when they get to 15 months old, if they're not fast enough. But I think now with all the bag tracks, they don't necessarily have to be fast greyhounds. And in the industry itself, we're governed by a body called the GBGB, Greyhound Board of Great Britain, and there's really strict rules on putting dogs to sleep. There is a vet at every single race meeting. You're not allowed to partake in a race if the vet's not there. And there's a non-euthanasia policy from the Retired Greyhound Trust where dogs are taken into kennels until they can be found a home. So I would say, I'm not saying everything's perfect because the PCA have to put dogs down, but the majority of dogs do end up in a RGT homing centre or taken home by their owners.
Aileen?
Well, coming back to the point Nora, a couple of points Nora raised there, I think the Greyhound Board of Great Britain, there's a great deal of lack of confidence in the ability to regulate the industry, to keep the welfare of greyhounds as paramount. Now, we've seen this in a number of reports. Very recently, there's been a review on regulations. And again, we're looking at injury figures not being made public. We're looking at vagaries all the time. It doesn't inspire the public's confidence, I'm afraid.
Could we, instead of banning this sport, Aileen, could we actually focus more on protecting the welfare of the dogs, as we might do in horse racing and other sports involving animals?
I know exactly what you're saying. I've looked long and deep into this. I'm not a killjoy. I'm not somebody who wants to, stop people having a good time. But what's become very apparent to me is it's a good time at the price of a dog's health and a dog's life. The more I look at it, the less I can see a way forward. That if you maintain a commercial industry, that it's not based on these inherently cruel practices. If you look at the volume of these dogs, it's a very industrialised process now. The dogs are very much seen as a product.
And they're bred for this?
Yes.
They're bred for this. If they don't meet the mark, you're saying they're culled, and then when they do get through into the races, a lot of them end up dead?
A lot of them end up injured. A lot of them end up, we don't know where, because, again, I raised the point, the injury and put to sleep rates, although they're collected, are not made public. So, there's vagaries there that need to be. Why hide it, basically? What's there to hide? Get the information out there. Let people make informed decisions and choices.
03030 80 55 55, especially if you enjoy greyhound racing. Tell us why you enjoy it and what you think of what you're hearing from Australia. Hello, Liam.
Hello, William. How are you?
Liam, what do you make of this?
Well, I've always been against any sport, and it's a sick sort of name to give us any activity that involves suffering, because that's completely the antithesis of the word sport. It's about enjoyment, and nothing should suffer in the cause of it. And greyhound racing, we all know that uncompetitive dogs, we know where they end up. This is just now out in the open. For some of us, we've seen that for a long time. But I would like to say this. On the opposite side of training greyhounds, there is the hare coursing argument. And I have asked Sinn Féin why they continue to endorse it. I've asked Martin McGuinness in your programme, and they still endorse hare coursing. And that is a continuum of greyhound racing. So not only do greyhounds suffer, but other animals suffer in this country. The Dáil has passed hare coursing, or has not suspended it, only last week. So the whole industry is predicated upon competitiveness or death. And that's not sport, in my opinion. Nowhere near it.
Nora, do you want to respond to those comments?
Well, we've had hare coursing banned in Britain, and I know in Ireland they still do it, but the dogs are muzzled, so they can't kill any hares, and apparently the hares are taught to run to the escape bit, so I'm not sure of the statistics, but it would be very unlikely for a greyhound to kill a hare with a muzzle on. So I'm not endorsing it. I don't like coursing myself. But going back to the greyhounds, as soon as a dog is finished racing, you have to have a retirement form filled out. And if the GBGB don't hear from you in 6 months, they will be on the case about finding whereabouts the dog is. Nothing is perfect in this world.
And what happens if someone has not taken care of the dog in retirement? If they've put the dog down, what happens then?
Well, they don't really advocate that. They shouldn't be putting them down. There's plenty of kennels now. There needs to be more where they can put the dog into a RGT kennel, or say something like we have next door, the Hersham Hounds, and the dog will be kept there for life.
But what kind of penalty is there, Nora, if someone doesn't do that, if they do put the dog down?
Well, I think they can fine them, and they can ban the owner from having another greyhound.
OK. Daniel's with us, Daniel Barclay, who's from the Northern Ireland Animal Rights Group. Good afternoon, Daniel. Welcome.
Hi, William.
Your thoughts on this?
Well, I have plenty of thoughts on it, but I just wanted to make a point. In Northern Ireland, where we are, we're not governed by the GBGB. We're not really governed by anyone. Our government actually don't have any responsibility for the greyhound industry in Northern Ireland. We're governed by the Irish Coursing Club, who have no legislative powers up here. So effectively, our greyhound industry here is self-regulating, which, opens the door for plenty of exploitation. And so the regulations that the lady was talking about there just don't exist here.
So you're saying it's a free-for-all?
It can be. The mechanism is there for a free-for-all, and we have. I'm sure many people know of Norman, the greyhound, who was found abandoned with his ears mutilated. He's not an isolated incident. That happens quite regularly with dogs washing up on the banks of the foil with their ears cut off. Because the reason is they weren't fast enough. They have the trainer's ID tattooed on their ears, so the best way to avoid detection is to hack off the ears and abandon the dog, dump the dog. It's rife with cruelty across the world. I mean, what's happening in Australia isn't new. 40 states in America have banned greyhound racing for the same reasons. China, where a lot of Irish dogs are shipped off to, has horrendous cruelty, and it's under a lot of pressure. I think one of their main greyhound tracks in Macau is actually closing down for that very reason. And, you know, while a lot of people do see, you know, it's dogs racing and it's good to see dogs racing, dogs love to run. Dogs don't love to race, because when they're racing, they're chasing something that they're never actually going to catch. So that causes a lot of frustration. It causes, you know, sort of, there's mental health issues with the dogs there. Again, we have here in Northern Ireland, in Drumbo racetrack, 4 healthy dogs broke their ankles in one night in Drumbo, and they were all put down on the track on that night. And those injuries would have healed. The problem is the dogs wouldn't have been fast enough. They wouldn't have been able to race again. And the trainers decided that they didn't want to put the money in to bring them back to health.
I think that incident was in 2012 you're describing, wasn't it?
It was, yes.
We were in touch with Drumbo Park Greyhound Stadium today to ask if they would put a spokesperson on there to respond to that kind of case and that incident, but no one was available. I'll just make that point, Daniel. Daniel, do you detect any kind of interest in the Northern Ireland Assembly in taking control of this situation? You've described it as a kind of legislative no man's land where it's a free-for-all for those who are involved.
One of our campaigns, we have a lot of campaigns at Northern Ireland says no to animal cruelty. One of our campaigns is greyhound racing, and for the last couple of years we have been working with the likes of the DUP, the Green Party, the Alliance Party, to try and get a Stormont department to actually take on, you know, the responsibility. The previous Agriculture Minister has pretty much, it was Michelle O'Neill, at the time she wrote back to us saying she was content that the Irish Coursing Club were regulating it, and she saw no reason to, you know, for Stormont to take responsibility of that. We completely disagree with that, because while they can't regulate it properly, they can't regulate it fully, in the interim, we would obviously love to see it banned because of the cruelty that I've already mentioned. It just scratches the surface. But in the interim, we want to see tighter regulations to make sure that the animal welfare is the top priority. And that can't be done while our own government don't regulate it. Now, they are covered, obviously, under the animal welfare legislation, but the amount of dogs being bred for greyhound racing, I think last figures, a couple of years ago, there was 10,000 greyhounds disappear on this island every year. That's a vast number of unaccounted for dogs. And while the lady again was saying about good retirement plans, and a lot of trainers do look after their dogs in retirement, that's not the case for the vast majority. There's too many dogs unaccounted for, and they're not being registered properly, and they are being destroyed and abandoned. And we see that with Norman and the other dogs in Russia.
Daniel, thank you very much. Nora, let's get your response to that, because obviously that's a very different legislative landscape to what you're describing in Great Britain.
Yes, and I would agree. They do need legislation. Maybe they could liaise with the GBGB, who, and in my opinion, they are getting better every year and bringing in stricter rules. We have stewards that come round and inspect the kennels a lot more now to make sure the conditions are good. When he mentioned that 10,000 greyhounds disappear, I would imagine most of those are coming to England for racing, because the British breeding is very, very low. And if you have a look at all the dogs' earmarks, I would say a good 80% of the dogs running in England are from Ireland. And as I say, the bookmakers could contribute a lot more than they do, or any betting industry should. And I think the majority of that money should go towards the welfare of the greyhounds in their retirement. And I totally agree with that gentleman that said about the dogs breaking their hocks. There is absolutely no need whatsoever to put a dog down with a break. It doesn't cost a fortune. I've had dogs that have broke their leg. They come back to the kennels that night. They eat their food. They're wagging their tail. They cope very well. And they either go on to stay in the kennels forever, or they go into a nice home. So there's no reason to put anything down unless, in my opinion, it's got cancer.
I suspect, Eileen, when a lot of people go, or Aileen, when a lot of people go to watch the dogs racing, they don't see any of that stuff. That's not what they see when they're standing there.
No.
So they're enjoying a night at the races. They're seeing the dogs jumping and racing and running, and they're thinking that's great. And is there a way that we can protect the simple enjoyment of all of that without banning this sport, but in a way that also protects the welfare of these animals?
Okay. Just a couple of points, and I will come back to the very question you've just asked me. The first is, I think, with regards, there are issues in the UK, there are issues, across the world with greyhound racing. It's being recognised, awareness is raising, people's voices are being raised. One of the good sources of getting some ideas of how the situation in Ireland is, have a look, I'd say to people, at the Greyhound Rescue Association. You will see figures there which are a real eye-opener and which, gives us an indication that there's a huge gap in the traceability of tens of thousands of greyhounds bred in Ireland. And that also includes figures where greyhounds have been exported to the UK. Now, into England, I should say. Now, when you asked me to say, how do people really see this? Or is it just a nice evening out? I can honestly say from when I've been to trackside, it's not been a particularly pleasant evening. It's usually not in a very pleasant environment. Thankfully, I've never seen a dog killed at the track because, it's not somewhere I've been very often, shall we say.
Sure.
But I have spoken to people who have, including people who are trainers who'd given up on the basis that they were just absolutely horrified at the reality.
Nora, we're getting people texting us with some terrible stories. One person saying, I used to go walking around some of the lakes in South Armagh. I used to come across sacks full of greyhound pups that were drowned because they were no value to the owners, and that's an awful description. Andrew in Belfast, greyhound racing is obscene. I volunteer for an animal shelter. We see greyhound after greyhound abused and dumped. If the trainers love racing so much, strap a muzzle on them, he says, let them run around the track. And then the suggestion that other animals are used as live bait to try to draw the blood, as it were, in the greyhound. Your response to some of those pretty gory descriptions of this sport?
I'm not saying anything is perfect, but I don't think you'd get away with giving any live bait to any greyhounds, and it isn't necessary because the greyhounds themselves just like running, and I think a lot of the animal shelters, there's an issue for all dogs. When they come over, there's a lot of dogs, what I call pet dogs, non-greyhounds, come over from Ireland to be rehomed, and I would agree with a lot of these people's comments, and I think the solution to me would be for more people who are anti-greyhound racing to have discussions with the GBGB people and see if we could get the best possible welfare conditions.
And try and fix some of that,
these animals.
Nora, thank you very much.
Would it not be helpful?
Last word, Eileen, go ahead.
Would it not be helpful? Would it not be helpful, Nora, to actually have shared information, public injury information out there in the public
statistics
domain?
out, then we know what we're looking at, then we know how to fix it, if we can fix it. Eileen, thank you very much. Eileen Ward from Great Exploitations, the campaign group, and thanks also to Nora McElstrom, greyhound racing trainer, and also trustee of Wimbledon Greyhound Welfare, which is one of those groups that takes care of retired dogs. Lots more still to come, and your calls 03030 80 55 55. We'll be going to Dallas soon to find out what's the latest. It's 1 o'clock.